Hello everyone, it's Merlin here, and today we're going to be doing a character analysis of a particular anime character, and that would be Greed, specifically from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, I'll be honest, upon thinking about the series and thinking about Greed and Brotherhood and doing a little bit of research, I realized that there isn't a great deal of analysis that's involved with Greed, at least in Brotherhood, and admittedly, I do prefer Greed in the first series, but this doesn't really have anything to do with that. There is really just much more to his characterization and actions, I think, in the original anime. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about with Brotherhood in that particular Greed. But the reason why this video is going to be a little more informal is because I just don't think that there's enough to really put a whole lot of, detail in. So I'll just get my general thoughts out at least, though. Basically, from what we know with Brotherhood, is exactly the same as in the original anime, in the sense that he is, well, incredibly greedy, egotistical, and selfish. His primary motivation is basically the same, but as we know, it goes a very different direction. Brotherhood's greed, we see that he basically was, like all the homunculi, an extension of Father's humanity he wanted to get rid of to eliminate his weakness so he wouldn't be distracted in his ultimate plan. But Greed was kind of the most ambitious and rebellious of them, implying that greed was probably one of the strongest aspects of Father's personality that could have led to his downfall, and also the closest thing related to his humanity, which would explain one reason why Greed might have some elements of conscience, oddly enough. Even though he was greedy and selfish, he does ultimately side with the heroes, maybe partially through his relation to them and his acceptance of them and their ideas. Though that's kind of hard to say for sure. Greed is essentially killed early on, but he's remade with all the same personality traits, so it's essentially brought back to life. But the big thing is really his relationship with Ling, because he's infused with Ling, but his personality is so similar to Ling's that they actually work together despite the inner conflict that Father might have been thinking of. Now, Greed does take over the body sometimes, but obviously Ling has a lot of power and retains a lot of his own identity. And it turns out that his ego is so huge that it rivals Greed's, and a lot of their goals kind of line up. And that's what causes Ling and Greed to work together to ultimately save the world, though for Ling it's to save his people, and that's the primary motivation, whereas Greed thinks that he can just defeat Father and gain power that way. Gaining a whole empire to himself is enough to satisfy him, because that's a lot for anybody with greed, let's face it. But the thing is, though, Greed never fully gives in to the humanity. The best aspects we can see is that he does seem to care to some degree about those that worked with him. Early on, he had some camaraderie, and he did like some of Ling's ideals. He was always primarily motivated by his own greed, by his own ambitions, all the way until the end. That's why Greed's sacrifice in Brotherhood is not as significant as his sacrifice in the original anime. Now, this isn't going to be a debate about both series, because this was specifically about Brotherhood's greed, but I do want to at least mention that one of the big aspects that a lot of people have to admit is that the homunculi in the original anime, most of them have a lot more development and just a lot more to really do. And that's the same with Greed. Even though he technically is around less of the time in the original anime, his character development and his ultimate sacrifice is much more meaningful, but we can get into that some other time. With Brotherhood, he does help defeat Father, and it's actually very clever how he does it. He kind of tricks Father into basically going to a vulnerable spot that is based upon how well he knows Father. Because remember, the homunculi are extensions of Father himself. But once again, that aspect of humanity that he's closest to is prominently within Greed. Therefore, it was kind of his humanity that ultimately doomed him. And yes, Greed does die, and it's kind of meant to be this sort of tragic moment, but Greed is going out with his own ambitions intact. He wants to defeat Father, he hates Father, and he wants the God power that Father has ultimately for himself. He's basically Father's biggest rival. So it's not really a good thing what he was trying to do. If he tried to gain that ultimate power, that would not have necessarily been good. Even though Greed is likable and we do see some positive aspects with him, through and through, Greed is still ultimately a villain. And he's still kind of evil. Maybe not completely evil. I mean, certainly not the most evil of the homunculi. I mean, the good thing about all the homunculi is they do retain some aspects of humanity because Father is also partially human. So that is one thing to remember. But he is going out purely based on his own ambitions. So really, it's not so much Greed's characterization of himself that's important. Really, it's two things. It's Father's connection to humanity and his rivalry with Father itself is what we remember. Greed really just tells us a lot about Father, interestingly enough. That humanity, and humanity ultimately being his undoing. And his greatest fear is greed, and his greed being the most ambitious thing against him. Because despite all the times that Father tries to extend these things and remove them from his being, he cannot escape who he truly is. And his greed, his desire for power, is arguably the most significant thing about him in his quest, because he wants to control everything. He wants to be powerful. And greed is just the clearest extension of that. And that is the primary purpose of greed within Brotherhood. At least from what I can see. Does he have some characterization beyond that? Yes. But unfortunately, much like a lot of the other homunculi, he still serves to be kind of villainous. The only reason he gets to have that interaction and growth at all is because of Ling. But at that point, Ling's personality really overtook Greed's. So it's almost a completely different character. But once again, oddly enough, fused with humanity. So maybe getting closer to Father's original form than we might originally have thought. Well, guys, those are my thoughts on Greed from Brotherhood. Let me know your thoughts below. And don't worry, there'll be plenty of anime character analysis coming soon. And they'll be a little more in-depth and a little more professional on this, but I kind of wanted to get this out of the way. And I didn't think there was a whole lot that really needed to be said with this one. But if you guys thought I missed anything, please let me know below. Alright, everybody, stay magical.